and let everybody know how much I appreciate them. I'm aware it's National Social Worker Appreciation Month, and I had hoped that we could do something either in person or at some point, but we're still under restrictions. They just sent out revised restrictions, and funds are under restrictions. So unfortunately, all I can do is express verbally my appreciation and how much I really do recognize the hard work that all the social workers put in and the parent mentors also put in, and want you to know that I do see that. And I'm sorry that I'm kind of have my hands tied right now that I can't even have us in person, to manage a way for us to at least have celebratory cake or something. But that as soon as restrictions do allow me to set up a gathering, I would like to do so. For the whole program, it's just, I miss seeing everybody in person. Most of you I worked with, but I really did want to express my personal appreciation, but also the program and the AOC's appreciation to everybody's hard work. And I don't want to take too much time because I know everybody's on a short schedule, but I really did want to make sure I said that.
Thank you, Twyla.
And we'll keep working on something in person someday. And
All right, so
we good to,
I think so. I haven't heard back from Gerard, but go for it. I don't want to take too much time.
and I think everybody already knows Dr. Alicia Summers, and I don't know, it's not doctor, right? I keep wanting to ask you, Terry Deal, of the National Center for State Courts. And I'm going to shush now because they have important things to present, but thank you.
Thank you, Twyla. Thank you, everybody. Could someone allow me to share my screen? Someone has to give me permission.
Sorry about that. I'll make you and Dr. Summers co-hosts.
Okay, thank you so much.
Twyla too.
Hi, everybody. It's nice to see you again. Last time I came to one of your meetings when we talked about definition of cornerstone and some of the data collection. And I wanted to take this opportunity to share what we're learning about the program so far and get some of your feedback and answer any questions that you have. In particular, we recently completed some parent interviews. As you know, we interviewed 33 parents, 19 of them were in NMFAP, and most of them were female. Yeah, most of them are for Bernalino. We interviewed them on the phone in November and December, and they each got a gift card for participating in the interview. Our purpose for the interview is to ask them questions about their relationship and communication with CYFD, how their case is going, if they felt involved in their case plan. Then we also had other questions that we asked specifically to parents who were involved in the program. So you'll see those in a little bit. But we heard so many nice things, wonderful things about you and your work, and I wanted to make sure that I shared that with you. So just jump right in. The way that all of these slides are set up is that the top is the heading is the major finding, so what we learned. And then you can see some supporting information and bullet points on the left. And then I've included some of the actual quotes from parents on the right. So one of the first things that we learned, oh wait, you can't see the PowerPoint? Can you see it?
I can see it.
We can see it, but it shows like what your next slide is and then your notes.
Oh, weird.
It's the notes page, yeah.
I don't have any notes, but let me see this again. How's that?
There you
Yes.
go.
Okay, cool. Oh, okay, good. Well, I have a lot of words on these slides, so it would have been hard for you to read if it was the other way around. So the first thing that we learned was that more program parents than non-program parents thought that their case plans are individualized to their family's needs. So you can see we had about the same proportion of program and non-program parents believe that they were involved in case plan decisions, but more program parents thought that those case plans were individualized. And I think that really demonstrates the power of the advocacy that both the social workers and the attorneys and parent mentors are doing around those case plans. And Dr. Summers and Miguel and I have had the opportunity to sit in some of your dependency mediations. And so we are documenting the advocacy that we see there as well. And then I just thought it was telling too that this one individual said that originally they felt like everyone was against them. Oh, wait. Now I'm reading the next page. Sorry, I gave you a little teaser because my screen still looks like that. But people were saying that they were part of the decision-making process in that they were able to agree or disagree with what their caseworker had put on their plan. I'm going to speed through these because I know we have a little limitation on time, but please feel free to jump in if you have questions. There was really no difference in program and non-program parents' views of COFD. About half of program parents and about half of non-program parents were able to identify ways that COFD was helpful for them. And 2 program parents additionally described ways that their social worker helped improve their relationship. And I think this is one example of that. They felt like everyone was against them, and then that all changed once they got their social worker. Parents participating in a family advocacy program get more support preparing for and debriefing court hearings. So all the program parents talked about the support they got from social workers and attorneys preparing for and debriefing from their hearings. About 88% of the non-program parents, about 58% of the non-program, 48, I'm sorry. I have so many screens looking at me and so many different slides. I'm having a hard time focusing. 42% of non-program parents were able to identify someone who helped them prepare for court. Usually that was their attorney, but in some of those cases, that was actually their CYFD caseworker. But all program parents said that their social worker and attorney were helping them. So I thought that was important to show because that really is a difference between how prepared parents are for their hearings and what support they get in preparing and debriefing a hearing. More program parents than non-program parents found their attorney to be helpful. So we had a couple questions specifically about attorneys, and the program parents in New Mexico Family Advocacy Program described meeting with their attorneys more often than non-program parents did. So 89% of program parents said their attorney was helpful, and less than that said that, and then 67%, about 2/3 of non-program parents said their attorney was helpful. So one of the things that came out of this was that the attorneys, the program attorneys, from the parents' perspective, are meeting earlier and more frequently with their clients than the non-program attorneys experienced. So in this graph, you see the program parents are the blue line and the non-program parents are the orange line. And you can see that a greater percentage of non-program parents meet the day before, the day of, or never with their attorney prior to a hearing. And we can see that there's kind of equally split between week before, days before, or the day before for program parents. And incidentally, in the data, there were a couple of program parents who said they meet regularly, sometimes weekly, with their attorney and social worker. And then we ask these questions of parents. Does your attorney advocate for you in court? Does your attorney advocate for you in meetings? And does your attorney listen to you? And the blue line here is the program parents, and you can see that that is greater in every instance. So a larger percentage of program parents thought their attorney advocated for them in court, advocates for them in meetings, and listens to them. Any questions about that before I move on to the social work questions? So the next set of questions on social workers, we only asked of the 19 parents that had social workers. And this word cloud shows the of all of those 19, when they talked about their social workers, here are the words that came up the most. So the size of the word shows that it came up the most. So the bigger the word, the more times it came up. So for example, help, do you see how huge that is in the middle? That means that parents were saying helped more than anything else when they were talking about their social worker. So you can see some, I think, you can feel good about some of these words that they came out, that they talked about. So they're communicating with you, family was big, helped was big, visits, counseling. So there's a lot of really positive words that came up when they talked about the help that they've received from social workers. All of the 19 parents that we talked to believe that social workers help them in meetings with CYFD, advocate for them in out-of-court meetings, and help them identify things that they need. So I'll just leave this up for a minute or two so you can read the quotes. And then I have a bunch more I wanted you to read as well. And I'll make sure that I get these slides to you so that you can read them if I slip through too fast. These are additional examples that I thought were particularly powerful that parents gave about what they have benefited, how they have benefited from working with their social worker. And you can see in terms of the first one, stuff that CYFD should have done but didn't. That was a theme that came up a few times. But I think these quotes just really show the breadth of ways that you all as social workers are supporting these parents and families. Let me go to the next slide. Most of the parents that we talked to said that their social worker helps them with self-advocacy, connects them with services, and advocates for visitation when appropriate. So you can see not quite 100%, but I will say that when we asked about connecting to services, the individuals who said no also commented either because they didn't need additional services or they were already in services when they got a social worker. And the individuals who said that their social worker did not advocate for visitation, some of them, I would say all but one of them said that that was because it was the parent's choice not to increase supervision or visitation. So either due to working through their personal issues or work limitations, they did not want to increase their visitation. So I think those are important contextual information to include because those two, connection to services and advocacy for visitation, are two of the performance measures for the program. Any questions about that? Cool. And then about just under half of our 19 program parents had a parent mentor. And the number one, the most common reason that they thought the parent mentor was helpful was because they were a source of support. So I included this quote here from one of the parents who had a parent mentor. Again, everything that we heard from parents who did have a parent mentor was positive. One parent said, almost apologetically, that they did not utilize the parent mentor as much as they could, sometimes not answering phone calls, but it was nice to know that they were there. And one of the final questions that we asked was there any way that the social worker and the parent mentor could improve their practices or services to you? And overwhelmingly, 17 out of the 19 said they can't think of a single way that your services can improve. Only 2 had suggestions, and both of those suggestions mentioned increased communication. So before I get to, that was my summary of our interviews of parents. I know I went through it really quickly. I have other stuff to talk to you about, but I want to just kind of take a pause and see if you have questions about the interviews.
Not a question, but I'm impressed. That's a lot of positive feedback and shows an impressive amount of work.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I echo that as well. This is the first time I'm seeing these slides, and it's really awesome that we're able to get this qualitative data. And just to echo what Twyla said earlier, you guys are rock stars. This is tough work, and the proof is in the pudding, so to speak. Like, we knew that already, but this just solidifies how awesome and dedicated you guys are, and just want to also extend my thanks to you all for the hard work that you do.
And I think the hard work doesn't go unnoticed. You know, when parents have the opportunity to be asked those questions, the work that you guys do shines through their answers and the change that happens with them. So this is a pat on the back for you guys, definitely.
I especially like the chart that you did that showed the frequency of words. That's awesome.
Yeah, I really liked the way you did that. That was really good, Terry.
Well, thanks. So the next part of the presentation is not as fun because it's not actual words out of people's mouths, but it's numbers. But I do want to go into this next part by saying that the reason why I want to share this information with you is because you do this work every day, you understand why the numbers are the way that they are. And just like how in that one slide, I had to provide examples of why people said no, that wasn't a negative no, it was just, I didn't need that. You will help us be able to interpret and understand these numbers because you do this work every day. So I'm going to share with you how we crunch the numbers in your logs and some of the trends that we are seeing now that we have, a good deal of data. So first, we see this chart here, and the blue bars are showing the average number of communication, or the amount of communication per case. So minutes of communication. Here we add up all the minutes that you put in your logs for any time that you're interacting with a client. And then the orange line is the number of cases. And so the trend looks like as a total number of cases increase, then the average amount of communication per case decreased. So on the surface, that makes sense, right? As your caseloads increase, you're going to have less time to be able to spend on every case. Also, we know that some cases are in different phases, right? So they're either early on the case where there might be a lot of activity, or later on in the case where there's not as much activity or need for interaction. So one of the things, one of the things that we're doing on our end is in our attorney logs, we ask them for the phase of the case, whether it's phase 1, phase 2, which is through adjudication, or in the review phase 3. We don't ask you that on your social worker logs. So we're going to combine we are combining in attorney and social worker logs. So we'll be able to look at this data by case phase as well. But I wanted to just show you this and see if anyone had any questions or reactions or thoughts about why we see this pattern in the amount of communication per case. Jen?
My question was just for clarification. Is this January 2021 through December 2021?
Yes, ma'am. Yeah.
Okay. And
speak on my part. Sorry, I'm not feeling so good, you guys. I've been sick for like the past week, so if I sound groggy, I'm sorry. Kind of what happened in my situation was I had a lot of cases in the early portion of 2021 that were working cases. I had some cases that followed me in that were not assigned through the grant, that were pre-implementation cases that were giving me a lot of hours. And those kind of tended to close out on me around April or May. And then since then, for me, it's been a struggle to get any cases that there is a lot of time that you can put in how I was putting in work before. It's been a lot of having to look for clients, or clients engage and you've got engagement for 2, 3, 4 weeks, and then all of a sudden they go MIA on you. And so then you're spending more time looking for them again. So for me, that's kind of what happened in regards to my numbers.
That's really helpful. Do others have similar or other thoughts? And I can't see any of you because my slides are up, so.
I was just going to ask about like implementation, like February 2020 through December 2020 data, and if you guys have looked at that or were able to.
Yeah, we have it. We don't have it here. But we have, I can't tell you off the top of my head what it looked like. Summers, or Dr. Summers, would you be able to bring up, while have the presentation up, would you be able to look on the box drive to see if you can pull down those other log reports?
Yes, I am looking right now.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I don't want to derail anything. I just was wondering to look at the trends.
And Terry, out of curiosity, is there an overlay that shows that the work is still there, so that it's clear? Because I know everybody was working. It's just, there's been quite a few cases where communication is a challenge and a barrier.
Absolutely. So I think, yeah, I don't know exactly how we would show that, other than the way we talk about like active and inactive cases. Like we'd have to have a solid definition of that to be able to show that here. And I think that's something that we're attempting with the phase data, right? To see if there's a difference between phases. But I think, you know, I want to stress that this isn't a bad thing, right? We are learning about the program. The first year data is a pandemic. So that data, who knows what it could have been, right? I mean, we're still technically in a pandemic, but I think we're all kind of, this is life now, right? But in your 2020 data, when you were just starting implementation, case counts were super low, and you were just getting off the ground. So here, like, we are still learning about what is that magic number of a caseload that you can meet the needs of your clients without feeling overwhelmed. So I think this is kind of one way to help us figure out what that magic dosage or caseload is.
I think it'd be helpful too to show like how many social workers and then what the average caseload was in December, you know, as the cases went up, to show why that number potentially dropped.
Well,
I know
and
for my
could
cases were settling down. And so there wasn't, you know, prior to adjudication, there was probably a flurry of contact. And then afterwards, it became just more routine. But that's just speaking for my cases.
And when you're doing your data, can you tell like how many are cases that are open that there's just no contact with the parent? Because there's a lot of times where, you know, the social worker is looking for the parent, or, you know.
Yeah, so our data is only the log data. So anything that you put in your logs is the information that we have, right? So one of the things we've thought, so we can see if you have spent time on that case, either time in communication with the client or time in communication with the attorney. But at this point, we don't have a necessary definition of what would constitute like an inactive case, right? And so that's something that we can think about, like what makes a case
It's not
but inactive.
Right, to where it's open, but the parent is not engaged, or, you know, because that is a thing.
Oh, yeah. I can't click on that chat for some reason. So if somebody chatted and wants to read it.
Oh, just Vicky saying she had to leave, and thank you.
Okay.
So the log files don't look exactly like this in terms of how we portray the data. We have the average communication per case in minutes, but we don't have the number of cases to overlay with it. It does look a little different. Well, clearly we started in February. We didn't have very many cases in it. Of course, as soon as I start. But it was pretty steady. It peaked in April with around 400 minutes per case, and then steadily declined between April and September to around 300 minutes per case. And that's what it was for the rest of the year. I'm happy to, I don't want to disrupt Terry's presentation, but to give you a sense of how it looks a little different here, of 300 minutes per case. Got that in February and March, but it steadily declines after that. So we do see a similar trend in terms at the beginning of the year, there's like an increase and then it goes down over time. But it's about 100 minutes, 50 to 100 minutes less per case average communication.
So I'm going to go to the next one. We have a couple other slides later about contacts with clients too, that are going to be similar kind of questions.
Terry, I have a really quick question, and I think we had talked about this before, but is there a way at some point where we can go back and remove cases that we know have been discharged to have another look at this? I know that that doesn't completely resolve everything, but since a lot of the cases, right, that don't have a lot of contact probably end up in discharge, is that feasible?
So we'll have to because of the way we have the data right now out of the logs, we would have to, I mean, yeah, anything's possible, Corey, but you'd have to think
like a lot of hours or
that.
Yeah.
No, but no, not necessarily. I think that what we would do is look at for cases that we would consider successful completion, right? Like if we're waiting for it to be finished, we'd have to wait until a case finished and then said, okay, we think this one was successful because it wasn't discharged earlier, there wasn't this, then go back and see how much average communication, because it wouldn't be like what happened today, because we don't know necessarily that case is going to discharge. Do you know what I mean? Or what happened this month?
Yeah, that makes sense.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, and it was just a thought, a question. So
one of the things that we will be looking at in the outcome report is what is kind of optimum dosage, right? Like what is the amount of time, either length of time in the program or amount of contact with the social worker that is likely to make a case successful. Like what is like optimum dosage, right? But we have to wait for cases to finish before we can look at that. So that won't be in this report that we're working on now. That'll be in the future.
thanks, Terry. Sorry, I didn't mean to derail you either.
You're not, no one's derailed. I must seem really like distracted today because people keep apologizing for derailing me.
No, I don't think you do at all.
Okay. No, please, any questions you have, go for it. So then also another trend that we saw, and this is just, this is for the data over the past year, but we definitely saw a decline in home visits over September to December. And this year we changed the way that we define home visits. So last year we only defined them as things that were marked in the log as a home visit by the social worker. Now we are also including COFD home visits and any meeting that takes place face-to-face with a client. And we saw this decline September to December, but if you recall, that was also when there was an upswing of COVID. I forget what the very name was. And also the holidays. And we know things drop off pretty dramatically around the holidays in the court world. But this is the pattern that we see for percentage of cases that had COFD home visits, and other in-person meetings. Then go to the next one, but if you have questions, please let me know.
Terry, I don't have a question, but just maybe a reminder to the group. So when you're filling out your logs, since I'm sorry, I'm doing some mommy multitasking. There's background noise. When you're filling out your logs, when you're indicating other in-person meetings, just make sure that in the column that indicates those present, I think it's the contact with, just make sure that it's the clients included in that, because that's how we're calculating all of the times that you're engaging with the client. So if you have some other meeting where the client isn't present, just make sure to use something else and to not use other in-person meeting. Does that make sense? And it doesn't happen a lot. I just see it occasionally in the logs. So you guys are doing a great job with that, but I just wanted to add that reminder.
And this slide talks about average time per case. So this is all time that was spent on a case, whether the client was there or not. The blue dashed line you see is the average time per case that we saw in 2020. For some of those reasons that were mentioned, either there were cases that had a lot of work that were happening at that time that closed off in this year, or just the number of cases were low for a time being. So last year we averaged 9 hours, and then you can see how the average here starts well above 9 in January and then kind of ticks down towards when we're at the end of the year. It's just under 6 hours per case. Again, we are also increased caseloads in some cases as well. And then this is just another way of showing the same information. So here is the percentage of cases that received 9 hours of contact each month. And we see that trend go down as well. I think what we really see from this, though, is that there are a handful of cases that get a lot more than 9 hours per month, which is why this percentage is kind of low. So whether that's cases that maybe are going through adjudication, or there's a lot of activity on a particular case during months, it seems as it's either get a lot or you don't. And then again, kind of the same message here is as a total number of cases increased, the average direct client contact decreased. That benchmark of 6 hours was the average amount of direct client contact that was seen in 2020. And so we're seeing that we're around there. We're wavering between like 5 and 7 hours of direct client contact on average. We see a drop off towards the end of the year. Again, COVID and the courts were closed or not having as many cases during that time too.
Do you think that part of that could have been like because it's cold too? Like people don't want to come out when it's cold. So meeting with parents, especially the ones that don't have a home, was more challenging during those months,
Yep. We also included remote meetings and phone calls and texts in this as well. But yeah, I think you're right. Nobody wants to do anything in the winter, right?
Louise, I saw you raise your hand. I can't hear you. You're not on mute though. Still can't hear you. You want to type it? Okay. Go ahead, Terry. She's going to type it.
Okay. So that's all that's what I have about contact and the way that we use the log data, the way that we show the log data. I would just ask that you continue to think about what are some of those reasons why we make, maybe communication or engagement isn't happening. What are those barriers? That would be really helpful for us to use that information in the report. And also, we may want to consider thinking about what is that tipping point that a case is not closed, but considered inactive. Is there some way that, because we have no way to know what that is right now on the log. So we would need to come up with what that definition might be. And I think you guys are the best ones to decide that. So be thinking about what that might look like and what you think it is on your caseload. And, maybe that's a discussion you guys can have at a future meeting. Okay, and so I have just two more things from the logs to show. I apologize for the small numbers on this one, but I was doing it quickly and I just copied and pasted. But as you know, one of the additions and changes we made to the log in the past year is that we have kind of increased the level of detail on referrals. So we have been tracking since June of 2021 all the referrals that you put in your log. And in the last quarter, about 15 to 22% of clients receive referrals from their NMFAP social worker every month. And so here, you can see this is just the data from June through December. See the type of referral on the left. Then number of clients receiving referrals are on the bottom. And then I've highlighted in green, kind of the greatest number of referrals or type of referrals for each month. So you can see really common one is counseling referrals, followed by inpatient substance use treatment, some others down here. In June, it was blank. So thank you guys so much for filling that in. It's really, and cleaning that data up, that was really helpful. So I just wanted to share this with you and see, like, is that 15 to 22% of clients receiving referrals something that you think sounds like it makes sense? Do counseling referrals sound like they should be? Does this resonate with you? Is there something that questions you have, I guess? Well, you're thinking.
I have another question.
Oh, yeah, sure.
So there's 3 of my cases that I can think of just off the top of my head this year. I've had to make multiple referrals for counseling because they'll start and then they disengage and say they have blue services. And then you're having to re-refer them out. Is that impacting the data any way? Because I mean, I've already put in for the one counseling, say back in July, and then I'm happy to re-refer again in September. And then they don't show in September, so then I'm re-referring in November. So it's the same client, but it's showing multiple referrals for the same thing.
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you for bringing that up. This would show every single one of those referrals. So another way that we could look at it would be by client. And so if we did just one referral, like the first referral for a certain type, then of course these numbers would be smaller, right? Because you might refer somebody to counseling in July and then again in August and again in September. So if we only did it once per person, that would be smaller. But yeah, these would show those duplicates. So every time.
You guys wanting to see those duplicates in this data?
I mean, I think that's okay, right? Because part of our purpose for tracking this is to try to put numbers to your work, quantify your work, right? And so I think that is So for that purpose, we would certainly want you to track that every time you made that referral, because that's showing you were doing something in line with the cornerstones that we need to track. On the other end, the way we would use this would be to think about how, if an individual was successful, maybe like we haven't done this yet, but we could say for successful individuals, they received this many referrals. And I'm arguing myself out of that. I think that in those cases, we would want you to track every single referral as well. Because maybe after the fourth one, they finally, followed through with counseling.
Right.
But all that effort that you put in before still counts, and it would still count towards what they needed to be successful. So I would say, yes, please count, even if it's a duplicate.
Okay.
Or Summers, you can argue, or if you have a different perspective, let me know. Because that's not come up before. So I thank you for bringing that up.
Terry,
Mhm.
this is Twyla. So just as a rule of thumb, then each person should be entering then every time they give that referral, every month they give it, even if it's a repeat, just to make sure everybody's doing the same consistent entry. Now, if somebody gives the referral, say in June, but the person doesn't use it, and so the social worker reminds them in July, hey, I gave you that referral over, it's expiring. Does that count as a new referral, or only if it's an actual new write-up of a referral, or however it's tracked?
So I'm gonna, my answer to that is if it's a new referral, another referral, not just, hey, remember I did that, but whatever constitutes a referral, for it to be tracked as a referral, that process again. Does that make sense?
I think so. Might be good, just either Camille or Catherine, just to make sure everybody's using the same definition.
Yeah, we can talk about that at our next meeting.
And Louise, I do see your chat. Yes, all the contact, and yeah, just like what Camille said, all the contact that was tracked in the logs, anytime it was contact, whether a video, text, we include all of that as time towards a direct client communication. Any other questions about referrals? So
One more time. Sorry, I just have questions popping in. In regards to, in my logs, especially, how come we're not tracking any of the work that just the social worker is doing? Because there's times to where, so client contact may look low, but there's going to be time in there that's going to be equating for that low client time, because it's been time that's been trying to find the client or talk to people about the client or anything like that. How come that's not being tracked anywhere? Or is it?
it is right here on this slide, average time per case. This
Okay.
includes any logged anything. So if you are, having supervision about this case, if you are talking to, if you're looking for anything that you track or log on your logs as time on a case, is captured here.
Okay, thank you.
And that's where there was the average last year of 9 hours per case that we see a little bit lower.
And Terry, I'm going to show my real inability and massive failure with math and numbers, but on that graph where it shows the amount of hours, average time per case, because it's the average of all the social workers, somebody not tracking could, or somebody not having as many numbers could bring down the average, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the other individual didn't have a higher level of work. It's just the average of everybody.
Yeah, so this is for every, this isn't averaged on social worker, it's averaged on client. So
Client.
client, however much time a social worker put towards that case, then that is tracked as time per case. So if one case had, we're going to assume that a portion of the case have less than the average, and then the other portion probably have average or higher. So it might balance out. I think this is where phase comes into play, right? Because we assume, we don't know yet, but we assume that there's more activity at the beginning or up till adjudication. We need to do some reformatting of our data structure to be able to tell you that answer. And that's happening. And then,
Susan, I have a question.
sure.
So the 22, the data that was just up, the 22 to something percent that got referrals. I'm curious how that, there it is, right? How that measured up to, compared up to, or jived with your feedback from clients about getting referrals. That yes, I needed it. No, I really didn't need it, so I didn't use it. Whether how that, numerically was the same or different for that, the data that came qualitatively versus the quantitative data. This makes me wonder how that measured. And also, then when you asked clients, were they seen from January, since you're measuring this, you have this two different sections of the year that seem different, and you're looking at the last one. Did parents identify which months they were more active?
So all of this information, quantitative data, comes only from the logs, not from parents. So we did not ask parents when they were active or not. The conversation about what phase they are in, that is, we have identified three phases of a case, which is in the way that the attorneys report their time is based on phase. We don't have that in our social work data right now. We're trying to make that happen so we can report on phase in this data as well. Also, the parents was a random sample, self-selected. It was not a randomized sample. It was a self-selective sample. So we can only talk about those 19 parents who were willing to talk to us. And I guess I can also say a limitation of not doing that through random sampling is that we likely only got parents who were probably engaged because they were willing to talk and it had a relationship with their team, in that they were able to get that information.
Okay,
So
thanks for
most
that.
of the parents said, yeah, we got what we needed, or we didn't need anything else. We can't say that about this data. This can only tell us the referrals that were happening.
Okay, thanks.
Question. Yep. Any other questions about referrals?
Terry, just back to the other question I had on the average spread out. Does that take out outliers, or are those still in there?
Mm-hmm. Yes, it does not take out outliers. That is average. Just an average. Mm-hmm. And my last slide is one of the newer additions to our data collection. And it's not pretty yet, it's just words, but we asked you to start tracking cornerstone advocacy. And we're seeing, we're seeing examples of cornerstone advocacy in a number of cases. However, most of the cornerstone advocacy events are reported by a small subgroup of caseworkers. And it's, interestingly enough, it's not even the same caseworker every month. So we're seeing, for example, in September, 51% of cases had advocacy in at least one of the areas. Most of that came from 3 social workers. In October, about half of the cases again had advocacy in the areas. Over half of those events were by 2 social workers. You'll see a similar pattern in November and December. And so one of the things that we can look into to see if this aligns when people are having like adjudication hearings, for example. But I would love to hear if anyone has other thoughts about why we might be seeing these patterns. Or if I didn't explain that well and you have questions, let me.
So Terry, what you're saying is that let's look at December, right? So for 65% of the Cornerstone advocacy events that were checked, it came from one particular social worker.
Mhm.
Okay. Do you guys have any thoughts on that one?
I would say I remember that the whole issue of what was advocacy and what wasn't advocacy was quite a question everybody had for quite a while last year. And it was part of conversations with you guys and with the internal conversations as well. And I don't know whether that, I mean, I think for a while, I think that maybe you thought that the people were putting that they advocated when it wasn't direct advocation to somebody. It was more like, come on, like, let's say, come on, lawyer, come on, let's do that. That's not advocacy. So I don't know whether, so I mean, technically saying that would have increased advocacy if they were advocating someone else to do their work. So I just wonder about that the whole question of advocacy was unclear to a lot of the folks in the program. So I'll just put that out there as a thought.
And we went through and wrote out a definition of advocacy and met as a group to go over it. If there continue to be questions about that, or if that's not working for people, that's game for conversation.
Terry, do you remember when we met?
I mean, Camille, I don't remember what I had for breakfast.
I was trying to remember too, because I'm wondering if these last few months were maybe someone that wasn't part of that meeting, or I don't know. I'm just trying to wrap my.
I want to say it was at the end of the summer. I want to say it was before we started counting this in September.
So I can kind of weigh in a little bit on this. So the instructions, I know that I sent out the instructions that you had created, Terry, in December. So prior to December, there might be some like wonkiness with the data. But what I was seeing though, like since, I know you're only reporting, I think through December, but what I've seen in the logs since that time is pretty consistent with the definitions, which is good. There are, I would just, again, a reminder to you all to just refer back to those instructions if you can, because I do see instances where there will be an indication of advocacy, but it is just like it doesn't fit the definitions. Like it might just be like you and the attorney or something. So, you know, that wouldn't necessarily fit. And I would just ask for y'all to keep an eye on it. But I guess my point is, I think like, so I sent it out in December. And so I think like Terry, when you look at the January, February, March logs, you might see some more consistency. I don't know. That's helpful.
Yeah, that is helpful, Corey. Thank you. So that's all I got. You are always welcome to reach out to me. There's my email on the next slide. If you have questions about this, and I will send this slide deck to Corey, and she can distribute it to anyone, to everybody. And if you have questions, let me know. I wanted you to see how we're using the data in the log, and that it is really important. And I appreciate it because I know it can be like super tedious. So I appreciate you doing it. And yeah, and I also was just really happy to have the opportunity to share with you all those nice things that the parents said. So you should, you know, they were very, they had very nice things to say. They're very excited to praise you all. So congratulations on great work.
Thank you, Terry. Appreciate all the work that you do and explaining, social worker explaining it and parent mentor explaining it.
Of course, I'm happy to do it. Awesome. Well, then I will let you guys go and I will pass this off to Corey, this slideshow off to Corey. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks, Terry. Thanks,
Thank you, Terry. Thank you, Dr.
everybody.
Thank you, Dr. Summers and Terry. Thank you, guys.
Yes, thank you guys.